Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam Sejahtera. Salam IPGKTHO, KASIH Melangkaui Horizon. Salam IPGM Peneraju, Kecemerlangan Pendidikan Guru Bertaraf Dunia. Dan salam Malaysia Madani. Yang berusaha, Encik Muhammad Aminuddin bin Abu Bakar, Pengarah IPG Kampus Tun Hussein On. Yang dihormati Dr. Muhammad Zairi bin Hussein, Timbalan Pengarah IPG Kampus Tun Hussein On. Yang dihormati juga ketua-ketua jabatan, ketua-ketua unit, para pensyarah dan semua staf warga IPG Kampus Tun Hussein On serta tuan-puan semua yang berada di hadapan layar. Baiklah penonton sekalian, saya selaku moderator kita pada pagi ini, Muhammad Zakwan Adaha bin Muhammad Izman dari Option Pendidikan Khas Masalah Pembelajaran Ambilan 2025-2030 IPGKTHO. Alhamdulillah, setinggi-tinggi kesyukuran dipanjatkan ke hadrat ilahi kerana dengan izin dan limpah kurnianya, kita dapat menjalankan webinar Wacana Ilmiah 5.0 pada kali ini. Tema Wacana Ilmiah kita pada kali ini adalah Guru Madani memartabatkan bahasa Melayu, memperkukuh bahasa Inggeris dalam inovasi penyelidikan dan digitalisasi. Bagi menambahkan keberkatan majlis, mari kita bersama-sama memulakan majlis kita dengan bacaan Ummul Kitab Al-Fatihah. Amin amin ya rabbal alamin. Tuan-puan yang dihormati sekalian, untuk makluman semua, program Wacana Ilmiah 5.0 ini merupakan anjuran daripada Jabatan Perancangan, Penyelidikan dan Inovasi IPG Kampus Tun Hussein On. Tuan-puan yang saya hormati sekalian, tanpa membuang masa kita lagi, dengan segala hormatnya, saya memperkenalkan panel kita pada pagi ini iaitu Dr. Muhammad NAFIS bin AZMAN. Beliau merupakan seorang pensyarah di IPG Kampus Temenggung Ibrahim. Beliau telah menyambungkan pelajaran beliau di peringkat ijazah sarjana muda dalam bidang pendidikan TESOL di Universiti Teknologi Mara sebelum meneruskan pengajian beliau ke peringkat ijazah sarjana dalam bidang Master of Education TESOL di Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia. Tidak terhenti di situ juga, beliau seterusnya melakar kecemerlangan akademik beliau dengan memperoleh ijazah Doktor Falsafah PhD dalam bidang Educational Studies dari Mercury University. Jelaslah bahawa latar belakang pendidikan beliau mencerminkan komitmen yang tinggi terhadap bidang pendidikan serta usaha yang berterusan dalam menimba ilmu demi kecemerlangan akademik dan profesional. Tajuk perkongsian beliau pada kali ini bertajuk Translanguaging Insight and Implications for Pre-Service Teacher Education. Untuk makluman semua, jika ada sebarang penyertaan pertanyaan dan soalan boleh diajukan menerusi ruangan chat YouTube di bawah. Selepas pembentangan, jawapan akan disampaikan oleh panel kita pada pagi ini. Tanpa membuang masa lagi, dengan panel kita pada pagi ini dipersilakan.
Thank you, moderator, for a very generous introduction of myself. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. And my name is Muhammad Nafis bin Azman. I'm a lecturer from Jabatan Bahasa in IPGK Temenggung Ibrahim Johor Bahru. And for the next 30 minutes, I hope so, I'll be sharing finding from my study titled Translanguaging in Linguistically Diverse Classroom, Insight and Implication for Pre-Service Teacher Education. And so I really hope that by the end of this session, you will walk away with a clearer picture of how translanguaging actually operates in Malaysian classroom. Number 2, 4 evidence-based findings on classroom scaffolding and translanguaging. And number 3, concrete implication for how our siswa and siswi guru, how we can prepare our siswa and siswi guru for our linguistically diverse classrooms in Malaysia. So let's get started. So why this study? Why did I choose to do EMI? Why did I choose to do translanguaging and interactional scaffolding? So just a quick context about EMI. EMI is English medium instruction. The use of English to teach subjects other than English in a region or in educational setting where English is not the first language of most of the student, most of the citizen, okay, most of the people. And EMI is actually becoming in secondary school, is booming, is becoming very popular in secondary school, but the research somehow still stuck up in higher education. This is according to the recent book chapters from GU 2025 and SAH 2022. Why secondary school classrooms are also as important as higher education classroom? Because secondary school classroom, have different challenges, different learning outcome, and this is the gap that I'm stepping into. So now, EMI is often seen as English only, but translanguaging, okay, I will explain about translanguaging in my next slide. Translanguaging has become a key classroom practice, okay, but translanguaging practice often centers in a dominant language pairs. It somehow excludes students who has limited or no access to those dominant languages. And most study also focuses on homogeneous setting where teachers and students share an L1, overlooking linguistically diverse classroom where teachers somehow do not share the same L1 as most of their students. And here what it gets interesting, scaffolding makes translanguaging work even better. I mean interactional scaffolding strategy. Interactional, okay, have shown a lot of study from failure to have shown a lot of promise alongside translanguaging in higher education and primary school. So I'm taking those lenses, translanguaging and ISS, into linguistically diverse secondary school classroom and seeing what actually goes on. And here why this matter for our pre-service teacher or our CISWA and CISP guru. Most of them later, when they get posted, they are walking into multilingual classroom, with an English only toolkit or BM English toolkit that just doesn't cut it. Okay, if we can show them what translanguaging and ISS actually look like in practice, they go in ready, to use their student full language repertoire from day one, instead of figuring out later in hard way once they are already in front of a class. So the research question that somehow drives this study: how are EMI classroom practices enacted in linguistically diverse secondary school through translanguaging and interactional scaffolding lenses? So a few keywords that I want to flag here: the word enacted, what yang bermaksud what teachers actually do, not what policy says, and the term linguistically diverse secondary schools, which the setting most past study or literature skips, and the two lenses framing the analysis. So I would want to also somehow share the relevant for pre-service teachers or CISWA and CISP guru. Whatever this question or whenever this question turns up in the kind of practice teacher preparation program could model, so new teachers that with real strategy rather than just theory. So here are the analytical framework. Here is the analytical framework. So I use two frameworks. The first one is translanguaging. I'm leaning toward WAY 2018 and Senos and Gorter 2021 definition of translanguaging, which is the fluid use of students' full linguistic repertoires for meaning making. But it doesn't stop there. Okay, translanguaging also include verbal, visual, and semiotic modes, and the whole these two things that our student bring with them to the classroom, to the language or whatever classroom they step in school. And the second framework is interactional scaffolding strategies by Harmon and Gibbons. and 𝓦𝓪𝓲𝓗 2023, which include probing, recasting, cued elicitation, linking to prior experience, appropriating, and recapping. So everything coming up later will be read through Translanguaging and ISS. So now, Malaysian dual language program context. So a quick word on the context of this study, the background context of this study. Under the dual language program, DLP is introduced, EMI is introduced into DLP, okay, which is carried out, which has been carried out in many selected primary and secondary school in Malaysia. And English is used to teach science and mathematics, but the students in these classes are anything but monolingual. In a single Form 1 or Primary 1 classroom, for example, you might have Malay, Chinese, and Tamil home language speakers learning quadratic equation in English. That seems messy, but it's also beautiful. It's also a beautiful reality we are working with. And now, here comes the methodology. So I will go very quickly on my methodology. So this was a qualitative study in one Malaysian DLP secondary school. So I work with 5 mathematics teachers across secondary 1 and secondary 4. I recorded their lesson, I transcribed the classroom interaction, and I then conducted semi-structured interview with students and teachers. So the transcript, both classroom observation and semi-structured interviews, were coded for translanguaging and the 6 ISS categories. And what emerged from my analysis were 4 key findings. So let's go through the key findings. Okay, now the first key finding. Okay, teacher used translanguaging to validate and reinforce understanding through translanguaging and ISS. So if you can see from these 2 excerpts, interview and classroom observation excerpt, when a student offered a tentative answer in BM, the teachers didn't dismiss it. Okay, they appropriated the student's answer, and the teacher recast it into English, and then feed it back into the lesson. That single move did 2 things at once. If you realize, the first one, it confirmed the student thinking was correct, and it modeled the academic register, and if you can also see here, translanguaging here is not just a crutch, it is a confirmation tool, it is a validating tool for teachers in the classroom. Okay, next finding. So this is the key finding number 2. Okay, translanguaging and ISS can be used to scaffold student thinking skills. Okay, teacher use translanguaging to scaffold student thinking, not just translate or switch words, switch languages. So if you can see here in teacher 5 lesson, T5 means teacher 5, teacher 5 lesson on gradient, the teacher asks student question in English, then repeat it in Bahasa Melayu. When student go quiet, she keeps the same question, comparing gradients, but makes the language easier, so student can actually engage with the maths. But the latter turns, you can see the teachers pushing students to justify their answer, and student replies in BM, tak sama, and the teacher follows up with kenapa tak sama. Using BM didn't lower the difficulty, never. Okay, but they were still being asked to reason and explain, and this finding is also backed up by the interview data. Teacher 5, for example, says, I switched to BM when they look lost. If I stick to English, they spend more time trying to understand the words than the maths. BM helps them think. Okay, and student 2 says, if you can read here, she has to think double when the question is in BM, which shows she's actually working through the problem. And student 5 adds, it is difficult for me to explain my answers. My English and BM are not good. It adds a caveat worth noting. It's a very important finding here. Some students struggle in both languages, BM and English. So here we can say that translanguaging might not help fix everything, So overall, translanguaging in our finding too work as a scaffold for thinking. Students still have to justify and compare just with the language, but the language barrier here is lowered. Now, key finding number 3, the teachers scaffolded beyond language itself. Not every class could rely on Bahasa Melayu as shared resource. So, because we have students who are very fluent in Mandarin in Tamil, but they are not fluent in English and BM, or BM student who is fluent in BM but not in English. So teacher 3 put it directly in the interview. I never use BM in my class. My students know myself, but I have to use very simple English and sometimes pictures to help them understand the concept. So when BM and English, for example, wasn't accessible to everyone, teachers leaned on simplified English, diagram, pictures, gestures instead. So the scaffolding extend past spoken language into visuals or other modes of meaning making. That's where multimodality, semiotic resources take place in language classroom or EMI classroom. Now, moving on the key finding number 4, it is perhaps the most, I would say, pedagogically rich. Translanguaging adapts across year levels. It doesn't matter Form 1, Form 2, Primary 1, Form 1 or Form 4. It is adaptable across year level. For example, in Secondary 1, Teacher 1 and Teacher 3 use translanguaging to clarify procedures like cross multiplication and to introduce key terms such as eliminate and equate. Teacher 3 even explained in the interview that she has to explain the terms in BM first because not all of the students understood the word subtract or equal because they were not in EMI primary school. And that's what we call controlled teacher-led instruction. And in Secondary 4, Teacher 2 and 5 use translanguaging very differently to prompt deeper reasoning and justify answers. So here you can see that Teacher 5 explained that some students understand, but they can hardly explain in English. So I let them explain in VM. So explain in BM. So the flexibility, lead to the shift from control to exploratory, from terminology to, I would say, argumentation. Okay? Sorry. Okay, now, what can we highlight from these 4 evidence-based finding? So what I want to highlight here, what I want to discuss here is pulling this finding together. Translanguaging and ISS aren't separate techniques or approaches or pedagogies. They are deeply intertwined. Effective teachers or effective EMI, effective language teachers are simultaneously managing linguistic resources or repertoires and scaffolding cognitive moves. That actually like an orchestra is a dual orchestration. The skill we need to make it visible, make them visible to our siswa siswi guru. Because saying that this is the approach. These are the approaches that will help you, will enhance your classroom practices. So here is, I would say, the cautionary note. In this classroom that I observe, Translanguaging somehow emerged spontaneously, not strategically applied. It was improvised in the moment rather than very well planned and well designed. So because it was unplanned, because it was very spontaneous, it lacked pedagogical intent, and it gave students very little agency. Not even student, even teachers' agency was very little, we could see. And it tended also to default to the dominant language, which is in Malaysia, of course, BM. So in the classroom that I observed, languages such as Mandarin and Tamil could be left out. Students who speak those languages could be left out of the meaning making in the classroom. So, and we did also see interactional scaffolding, or ISF move, like probing and recasting, were not pushing the learning very far. Student responses very brief. So this takeaway is clear. Spontaneous approaches, spontaneous pedagogical strategies is not sufficient. It's not enough. And this also highlights the need for more deliberate, more planned, more strategic planned teacher training. So future teachers, future siswa, siswi, guru can implement multilingual strategies like translanguaging with intent. Okay, and then my finding also reveals language inequity in EMI practice in secondary school, secondary DLP classroom, where not all L1s are, I would say, they are not fully utilized, and this actually raises a real concern about equity, linguistic equity in our classroom. When translanguaging defaults to BM and English, it can quietly reproduce inequity, because not all L1s are activated, are fully utilized. And our siswa and siswi guru, need to see this clearly. Multilingual practice is not automatically inclusive. It has to be designed to be inclusive. And if you do not do it appropriately or properly, you might overlook, or you might make those students who have limited access to the dominant languages in your classroom, doesn't matter English classroom, Mandarin classroom, Tamil classroom, these students who have limited access to the dominant language in the classroom might be overlooked, might be left out in your lesson. So I think this inclusivity is crucial, and our siswa and siswi guru need to be made need to see this very clearly. Now, this is the theoretical contribution. I think this is very important for me to explain as well. Theoretically, my study contributes by linking translanguaging with ISS in a single analytic frame, showing that they operate as a coordinated system, not as a parallel toolkit or approaches. And my study also extends translanguaging theory into multimodal and equity dimension specific to the Malaysian DLP EMI context. So now, if you somehow forget everything else from my for the past 20 minutes slide or my presentation, you have to remember that there are 4 tensions, and every one of them is really a question about how we prepare our pre-service teacher, how we prepare our siswa and siswi guru. The first one is like the question of validation or hidden deficit. Some students, if you see this, some student same student to reading, resourceful or struggling. It is all in the teacher's list. It is all in the siswa, our siswi guru lens perspective. So our siswa and siswi guru, should be trained. They should our training has to shape their mindset before they ever teach or before they ever walk into this rich, multilingual or linguistically diverse classroom. Not just hand them a trick. Okay. The second one, multilingual in name, bilingual in practice. So basically, multilingual is just on a paper. Okay, it's just in a policy. So we need to realize that we need to make our student, our siswa and siswi guru be aware of that every classroom has Tamil and Mandarin in it. Even though it doesn't, we need to prepare them. But most of the time, teaching still runs on BM and English, dominant languages. So we have to train our pre-service teachers to actually use that diversity, not just nose it. As we discussed earlier, as I told earlier, I informed earlier that translanguaging goes beyond languages, goes beyond switching codes, switching to languages. Pre-service teachers, our siswa and siswi guru should be trained to include multimodality, semiotic resources to deal with these, linguistically diverse students from different linguistic background. And the next one, adaptation, or is it just unprincipled improvisation? Okay. So without a rational, without flexibility, without any rational, without any plan, flexible or flexibility is just wing-gendered. Pre-service teaching, our siswa and siswi guru need to be trained, to reason, not only to reflect. And last but not least, spontaneity that reproduce hierarchy. I think this is, I would say, from my perspective, this is like the most important finding. Unplanned equal to unequal here. Left to chance, it defaults to the loudest language, to the most dominant language, and drops the rest. Okay, or sideline the rest. That is why I think we need to teach our siswa and siswi guru, or siswa and siswi guru need to learn how to plan inclusion, just not hope for it, And the bottom line is, I think this isn't about how do we do translanguage, how do we include multilingual strategies in a classroom. It is whether our siswa and siswi guru, our pre-service teachers training builds that equity, that insight into from day one, or just leave it to luck, probably. So I also want to add something more here. I believe that against our multilingual, multicultural, the backdrop, linguistic landscape in our country, in our classroom, to be more specific, I believe that our pre-service teachers, our siswa and siswi guru, need to have one course, bilingual policy, multilingualism in the classroom, a course that prepare them to face this linguistically diverse classroom, to deal with students from linguistically diverse background, before they walk into, to that classroom. They need to be prepared for that, or else, like I said, we just leave it to luck. And I believe that that is not an effective way, to produce future teachers. So yeah, like what I said, we can't leave it to the luck, Now, as a conclusion, so bring this together, translanguaging is already happening. It is happening in our classroom, whether we want it or not, whether we're realizing it or not. It could be in BM, it could be in English, it could be in Mandarin, it could be in Tamil, it could be in many other languages that we have in Malaysia, across every school years. The question is whether it will. The question is not about whether it will or it occurs. It is whether we prepare our siswa and siswi guru to use this multilingual approach or translanguaging or ISS intentionally, thoughtfully, strategically, and in a way that supports every learners, every child in the classroom. You know, this is really a call. This is like a call for us to rethink EMI, or maybe English classroom, ESS classroom, ESL classroom, or BM classroom, or Mandarin Tamil classroom in linguistically diverse school. The conclusions are these conclusions, are not abstract ideas. First, translanguaging together with ISS can support content and engagement, participation in the classroom, but only if it is strategically planned, not left to chance. Second one, secondary EMI teachers, okay, because I'm looking at EMI school, or maybe for English teachers or language teachers, need targeted professional development to do these multilingual approaches or translanguaging well. Okay, and then the third one, very important, non-dominant languages like Tamil and Mandarin must be treated as asset, not errors or obstacle, like I mentioned earlier. And finally, the policy, language policy or EMI policy, has to move away from language hierarchies. We need to move toward more inclusive multilingualism. So pre-service teachers, could somehow, inclusive multilingualism. So we can really reflect the inclusivity that we have been preaching for the past few years. So for pre-service teachers or for our siswa and siswi guru, during training, we need to have this language-aware lesson planning or simple bilingual scaffolds or reflective checks at the end of each lesson. If we build this into our program, our IPG program or our teacher training programs, I believe that the impact reaches or might reach every classroom that our siswa and siswi guru will walk into. Okay, and thank you sincerely for your time and attention. And I think I've shared what I have observed, and I would also want to know your opinions, your insight. Probably if you have any question, the floor is open. Thank you very much, and back to the moderator.
Thank you very much for your insightful and well-organized presentation. I truly enjoyed listening to your study and found it both informative and thought-provoking. I particularly appreciate the way you clearly explain the rationale for focusing on EMI in DLP classrooms, as well as how you connected your research to the current educational landscape in Malaysia. Your presentation not only highlighted the theoretical foundations of your study, but also demonstrated its potential practical implications for teaching and learning in multilingual classrooms. What I found especially interesting was how your findings contribute to our understanding of classroom practices within EMI and DLP contexts. The way you presented your methodology and interpreted your findings made it easy for the audience to appreciate the significance of your research. It also prompted me to think about how these findings might be extended to other educational settings beyond those included in your study. And with that in mind, I would like to ask one question regarding the broader applicability of your research. The question is, your study focuses on EMI or DLP classrooms specifically. How practical or relevant is this to teachers in non-EMI classrooms in Malaysia, for example, regular sekolah kebangsaan or SJKC and SJKT settings? Could you please elaborate on that for us?
Thank you very much for the question. So I think this is a very important question. For me, it's very important because the reality is most of our classroom in Malaysia, they are not DLP classroom because they are not met. There are quite a number of DLP DLP school, but they are not as many as the non-DLP school. Yet I think the linguistic diversity I'm describing is not unique to EMI at all in Malaysia. Whether we are teaching in sekolah kebangsaan, sekolah jenis kebangsaan Cina, sekolah jenis kebangsaan Tamil, we still have students working in with Tamil, Mandarin, Hakka, Iban, Kadazan, languages that do not disappear just because the medium of instruction is BM or English or any specific languages. And what this study offers to non-EMI teachers is not a set of EMI specific techniques, but a way of, we see that we recognize our students' home languages. They are already there in the classroom, whether you acknowledge them or not. The translanguaging that my participants were doing in the classroom, in DLP classroom, it validates understanding, it bridges the concepts, and it allows, I would say, peer support across languages. So these are not DLP exclusive practices. This is not exclusive for only DLP classroom. So any teacher, any language teacher, any EMI teacher, any teachers that who have to teach language subject or their subject in other languages in any Malaysian classroom can ask yourself, am I creating space for my student full linguistic resources, or am I only seeing the language I'm teaching in? This mindset, that kind of question, that kind of reflection shift, I would argue is relevant across all school types, across universities, I would say. So pre-service teachers especially, we need to build that awareness early, because they carry it into whatever classroom they will eventually walk into, whether it is DLP, EMI or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. I genuinely enjoyed listening to your work and appreciate the clarity with which you communicated with your study. Your presentation successfully demonstrated the importance of your research and highlighted several valuable pedagogical insights that could potentially enhance teaching and learning. I also appreciate that your recommendations were grounded in empirical evidence rather than being based solely on theoretical assumptions, which certainly strengthens the practical significance of your study. As I listened to your presentation, I found myself reflecting on the relationship between educational research and institutional practice. In many educational settings, particularly within teacher education institutions such as IPGM, lecturers operate within well-established curriculum frameworks that have undergone extensive approval and quality assurance processes. Our teaching is guided by prescribed course outlines, program learning outcomes, structured syllabi, assessment specifications, and also accreditation requirements. So all these frameworks provide consistency and accountability, but they also mean that lecturers have limited autonomy to introduce substantial curricular changes independently. This raises an important question about implementation. While your recommendations appear both innovative and educationally valuable, I am interested in understanding how you see them being translated into practice within contexts where institutional flexibility is necessarily limited. In other words, I am curious about the extent to which your proposed ideas require structural curriculum reform, or whether they can realistically be integrated within existing curricula and regulatory frameworks without necessitating formal changes to approved course documentation. We will now open the floor to questions from the chat. I'll begin with the first question. This all sounds very ideal, but we are lecturers in IPGM. We have fixed course outlines, structured syllabi, and accreditation requirements. Are you suggesting we can change the course outline? That's not something we can just do. I would like to invite our presenter to respond to the question.
Wow. Okay. I think I like that question because I think I need to make myself be very clear here that I'm not here in this webinar. I'm not here to tell IPGM lecturers to rewrite their course outline. That is actually an institutional and policy level decision that goes well beyond what any single study can or should prescribe, So what I'm suggesting, is much more like realistic, we don't need to change what we teach. We can change how we teach it and for example, what example we can use in the classroom. For example, if we are already running a language across the curriculum or some methodology course or teaching practicum briefing, we can bring in real classroom data like the excerpts of my study, for example, and ask our siswa and siswi guru what do they notice about how teachers are using language, what languages are present in the classroom. Ask them whose voice is being heard and who isn't. That is not we are changing the MK or the course outline. That is like a pedagogical choice that we want them to make in their classroom and what we want to make in our lecture, in our classroom. The same goes during micro teaching assignments, or we have that kind of things in IPGM, right? So we can set scenarios, that reflect linguistically diverse classroom, not just the, idealize that, the ideology of English only or dominant language only classroom setting, So the question here, I would want to say that it is not really whether we can change the course outline or the MK or whatever. The question is within what we already have. Are we making space for this linguistically diverse classroom reality, our multilingual reality? And I think most of us lecturers really care deeply about that, and my study, or my presentation today just gives you the evidence, to back it up. I hope I have already answered the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insightful and engaging presentation. I appreciate the clarity with which you explain the concept of translanguaging and how it is positioned within contemporary language pedagogy. Your presentation was particularly helpful in highlighting the theoretical underpinnings of translanguaging as well as its relevance in multilingual classroom contexts, especially in Malaysia, where multiple languages coexist in educational settings. One aspect that I found particularly useful was the way you distinguish translanguaging from traditional views of bilingual practices in the classroom. Your explanation helped to clarify that translanguaging is not merely about the use of multiple languages, but rather involves a more dynamic and integrated view of learners' linguistic resources. This has certainly contributed to a deeper understanding of how language practices can be leveraged to support learning. At the same time, your presentation also prompted me to reflect on existing classroom practices in Malaysia. Many educators are already familiar with and frequently use code switching as a strategy to facilitate understanding among students. In fact, this practice has long been embedded in teaching across various educational contexts in Malaysia. And this leads me to wonder about the conceptual distinction and added value that translanguaging brings to this discussion, particularly in relation to classroom practice. Let's see another question from the chat. Isn't translanguaging just code switching? Teachers in Malaysia have always done this. What's new here? So could you please share your thoughts on this?
Okay, thanks for the question. I think it's very important for me to unpack this. I think it's important for us to unpack this thing, code switching, translanguaging. Code switching and translanguaging, they are related but not the same. Dia macam sama tapi tak serupa. Okay, code switching tends to describe moving between I would say languages as separate. It's a bounded system, switching from English to BM, okay, for example. And translanguaging, as I said earlier in my presentation, following DIGI-ViS 2018 and Senos and Quarter 2022, is broader. It includes verbal, visual, and semiotic resources. It is about students and teachers drawing on their entire or full linguistic resources or repertoires as one integrated system for meaning making, for knowledge acquisition. So yes, we Malaysian teachers or lecturers have always been flexible with language, but what my study does is name it, theorize it, and just show you, expose you on how it works systematically in DLP classroom, to be specific. And for pre-service teachers, that distinction matters because the difference matters because it somehow, I would say, reframes what they are doing from breaking only certain dominant language only rules to deploying a legitimate, a valid pedagogical strategy. So I just want to add one more thing here. This paper is going to be published very soon. I hope I can finish the revision very quickly. And I also have one paper regarding this kind of topic as well. It is about perception, ideology, and belief of stakeholders regarding similar topic. And then I also in print, so far in print, it has been accepted, but it is in print. And I have one paper published already. You can search online on that I view from the policy and official document perspective, and again, I really hope that I have answered the question, and thank you.
Semoga jawapan yang telah diberi akan memantapkan lagi ilmu dan pengetahuan yang telah dikongsikan. Terima kasih diucapkan kepada Dr. Muhammad NAFIS bin AZMAN di atas perkongsian kali ini. Semoga perkongsian sebentar ini dapat memberi manfaat kepada kita semua. Terima kasih juga saya ucapkan kepada semua yang setia menonton dari awal hingga ke akhir rancangan ini. Terima kasih saya ucapkan kepada pihak urus setia di belakang takbir dan kru penerbitan yang telah menjayakan program ini. Sebelum saya mengakhiri webinar kita pada kali ini, izinkan saya menyampaikan dua rangkap pantun. Petang redup di tepi taman, burung berkicau terbang tinggi, ilmu dikongsi penuh budiman, moga kita bersua kembali. Anak desa menanam padi, singgah sebentar di tepi telaga. Andai ada umur dan rezeki, panjang usia bertemu juga. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.